Imagine being the government of the United Kingdom, wielding a massive parliamentary majority, controlling the legislative agenda, having all the power in the world, and then getting repeatedly bollocked by the common speaker like a naughty schoolchild who keeps forgetting their homework. That's exactly what's happening to Keir Starmer and his ministers right now. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, has had enough of Labour treating Parliament like an inconvenient afterthought, and he's issued what can only be described as a series of brutal public tellings off. And now a committee of MPs has backed him up with a scathing report that basically says, "You're breaking your own rules, stop it, and start showing some respect." Welcome to UK Political Insight, where we watch the government get absolutely destroyed for thinking they're too important to follow basic democratic principles. Today we're diving into why Labour keeps leaking announcements to the media before telling MPs, why the Speaker is absolutely fuming about it, and what it means when Parliament itself says enough is enough. Right, let's start with the basics, because this is about more than just political process. This is about how democracy is supposed to work. In the British system, Parliament is sovereign. MPs are elected to represent their constituents and hold the government to account. And there's a principle enshrined in something called the Ministerial Code that says when the government makes major announcements, they should make them to Parliament first, not to friendly journalists, not in carefully staged press conferences, not leaked to sympathetic media outlets, to Parliament, to the elected representatives of the people. Why does this matter? Because it means MPs get to question ministers about these announcements. They get to probe the details, challenge the logic, represent their constituents' concerns. It's called parliamentary scrutiny, and it's kind of fundamental to how our democracy functions. When the government bypasses Parliament and announces things to the media first, they're essentially saying, we don't want to face difficult questions. We'd rather control the narrative through friendly press coverage, and frankly, we don't think Parliament matters that much. And Sir Lindsay Hoyle is absolutely not having it. The Speaker has been repeatedly calling out ministers for this behavior, and it's reached the point where he asked the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee to investigate. This isn't just a minor procedural complaint. This is the Speaker, who's supposed to be politically neutral, getting so frustrated with the government's contempt for Parliament that he's taking formal action. The committee has now released its report, and it's absolutely damning. They concluded that ministers are ignoring their own code of conduct, not bending the rules a bit, not interpreting them creatively, ignoring them. The report highlights multiple cases that, in the committee's words, could reasonably be concluded to constitute a breach of the general principle set out in the Ministerial Code. That's parliamentary language for, you're breaking the rules, we all know you're breaking the rules, and you need to stop breaking the rules. Let's look at some specific examples, because this isn't abstract. In May 2025, the government launched new immigration policies. Huge topic, massive public interest, the kind of thing MPs would obviously want to question ministers about. Where did the public first learn about these policies? Not in Parliament. In the media. Journalists got briefed before elected representatives. The government decided that getting favorable press coverage was more important than respecting parliamentary procedure. Then there was the trade deal with the US, also in May. The Speaker actually had to order former Trade Minister Douglas Alexander to make a statement to the House, because the government wasn't planning to. Think about that for a second. A major trade deal with America, possibly the most important economic relationship Britain has, and the government thought they could just announce it without facing questions from MPs. The Speaker had to literally order them to show up and explain themselves. It's like a teacher having to force a student to present their project because they were trying to skip class. And then there's the prisoners being released early. This is a massive policy decision that affects public safety, criminal justice, victims of crime. You'd think the government would want to carefully explain this to Parliament, answer questions, address concerns. Instead, they just did it and hoped nobody would notice. The Speaker gave them a public telling off, saying, do not take MPs for granted. It is not acceptable. When the Speaker, who's supposed to maintain dignified neutrality, is publicly scolding the government like this, you know things have gotten bad. The committee's report notes that the Speaker has represented the dissatisfaction of the House through statements made in the chamber and when setting out the concerns of members across the House. This is important. It's not just the Speaker being personally annoyed. It's MPs from all parties being frustrated that they're being sidelined by a government that's supposed to be accountable to them. And the committee adds, "We share his concerns, and note this is a long-standing issue for which successive governments have been criticized." That last bit is interesting because it shows this isn't just a labor problem. The Conservatives did it too. Governments of all stripes have tried to bypass Parliament when it suits them. But the fact that it's a long-standing problem doesn't make it acceptable. If anything, it makes it worse because it means successive governments have learned they can get away with it, so they keep doing it. Committee Chair Simon Hoare absolutely nailed it in his statement. He said, "The government must take its responsibilities to Parliament under the ministerial code seriously. It is not a political version of pick and mix." I love this line because it perfectly captures what's happening. The government is treating the ministerial code like a buffet where you choose what looks tasty and ignore everything else. Don't fancy parliamentary scrutiny today? Just skip it. Want to control the media narrative? Leak to friendly journalists. Facing difficult questions? Avoid Parliament and do a press conference. Hoare continues, "It is the crucial mechanism for ensuring accountability to members of Parliament, and therefore the public. This is the key point. When the government avoids Parliament, they're not just disrespecting MPs, they're avoiding accountability to the public those MPs represent. Every time a minister leaks an announcement to The Guardian or The Telegraph, instead of making it in Parliament, they're denying your MP the chance to ask questions on your behalf. They're dodging scrutiny. They're putting spin before substance." The really brutal part of Hoare's statement comes next. We cannot have a continuation of the Speaker reprimanding ministers in the chamber, for the minister to offer some sort of apology or justification only for the same breach of the code to happen a few weeks later. This is the cycle we're trapped in. Minister breaks the rules, Speaker calls them out, minister says sorry or offers some weak excuse, everyone moves on. Then, a few weeks later, the same thing happens again. It's like a child repeatedly being caught with their hand in the cookie jar, promising not to do it again, and then immediately doing it again because they know there are no real consequences. And Hoare drives the point home. Parliament cannot be sidelined, and Parliament will not let itself be sidelined. All of our constituents deserve better. This is Parliament drawing a line. They're saying, we're not going to keep accepting this. The days of ministers treating the Commons like an optional extra are over, or at least they should be. The warning about perpetuating a cycle of growing discontent between Parliament and the government is particularly ominous, because what happens when Parliament and the government are at war? Nothing good. You get gridlock, you get constitutional crises, you get a breakdown in the basic functioning of democracy, and all because ministers can't be bothered to show up and answer questions before making announcements. Let's talk about why governments do this, because it's not just laziness or contempt, though there's plenty of both. The reason ministers prefer to leak to the media is simple. It's easier. Journalists, especially friendly ones, will ask softball questions or just report what you tell them. MPs will ask difficult questions. They'll probe weaknesses in your policy. They'll point out contradictions. They'll represent constituents who will be negatively affected. Parliamentary scrutiny is uncomfortable. It's challenging. It forces you to defend your decisions in real time. So if you can avoid that discomfort by just briefing journalists instead, why wouldn't you? Well, because it's anti-democratic, that's why. Because you're supposed to be accountable to Parliament, not to political editors. Because the whole point of representative democracy is that elected representatives get to question those in power on behalf of the people. When you bypass that, you're undermining the entire system. There's also a control issue. When you make an announcement in Parliament, you can't control how it's covered. Opposition MPs will immediately attack it. Your own backbenchers might express concerns. The story becomes about the controversy, not your brilliant policy. But if you leak to friendly media first, you get to shape the narrative. You get favorable headlines before anyone can criticize you. You control the story. It's political management, and it's exactly what the ministerial code is supposed to prevent. The immigration policy example is particularly egregious because immigration is one of the most politically sensitive topics in Britain.
People have strong feelings about it. MPs have constituents with very different views on it. You'd think a government making major immigration policy changes would want to carefully explain them to Parliament, answer questions, address concerns. Instead, they just did it and hoped nobody would notice. The Speaker gave them a public telling off, saying, "Do not take MPs for granted. It is not acceptable." When the Speaker, who's supposed to maintain dignified neutrality, is publicly scolding the government like this, you know things have gotten bad. The committee's report notes that the Speaker has represented the dissatisfaction of the House through statements made in the chamber and when setting out the concerns of members across the House. This is important. It's not just the Speaker being personally annoyed. It's MPs from all parties being frustrated that they're being sidelined by a government that's supposed to be accountable to them. And the committee adds, "We share his concerns, and note this is a long-standing issue for which successive governments have been criticized." That last